In the first video, we looked at creating masks using Create Form along with many other Revit modeling tools. We'll start with an example of turning this mask into building elements, going from design to documentation. Before we load it into the project, there are a couple of tools that I'd like to add. I've already added parameters and a profile, and I turned the X-ray on. The tool that I'd like to show you is the Edit Profile mode. With Edit Profile in this mask family, we can select the profile and change its geometry. It brings us into a sketch mode that we're familiar with. By picking here Finish Edit Mode, the mask updates with the new profile. Also, you can draw on one of the surfaces by picking Set and selecting that surface, and then picking Show to show that that's the surface that you're going to draw on, and then pick the viewer. And now we can draw right on that surface using the viewer. We want to take the check mark out of Make Surface from Closed Loops if you want to modify the closed loop once you've drawn it. So I'll draw a rectangle and then I'll select it and modify it slightly. Then in the drawing, I can select that rectangle and pick Create Form, Solid Form. I selected this reference plane and added an aligned dimension and then created a parameter for that dimension. And now we're ready to load this mask into our project. I'll start a brand new Revit project using the default template, and I'll set this one up in the 3D view. I'll use Control Tab to close out of the plan, and Control Tab would bring you back to this mask. And now pick Load into Project. When you first load it into the project, you'll get a dialog box that tells you that Revit will turn on the Show Mask mode so that we can see our mask. I'll go ahead and pick Close. Under Placement, we want to pick Place on Work Plane, and there's our mask. Before we create mask floors, we'll go to the south elevation and create several levels. I changed the first level to 15 feet and then used Copy with Multiple checked to copy multiple levels. Notice when you copy levels, Revit will not create automatically the level views in the project browser. One way to create the views quickly is to go to the View tab and pick Plan Views, Floor Plan. You can then hold your Shift key down, select all of these views, and then pick OK. Revit will then create all of those views. In the 3D view, we can select the mask model, pick Mask Floors, highlight the first level, hold your Shift key down, and put a check mark in the box to the left and pick OK. I'll change my visual display to shading with edges, and you'll see that we created mask floors. We haven't set the floor material or placed any building elements yet, but even before we do that, we can create a mask schedule. Under Schedules, in the View tab, pick Schedules and Quantities, and then notice there are two categories, Mask and Mask Floor. We'll pick Mask for our mask schedule and pick OK. We can add several fields. The fields that we're interested in are the gross floor area, we'll pick Add, and the gross surface area, and possibly the gross volume. I'll go ahead and pick OK, and there's our schedule. In the View tab, we can pick Close Hidden. It closes windows that are hidden by the current view. We have several open. And then open the 3D view. We can now go to the Masking and Site tab and select Floor. Selecting all of the floors, we can verify what type of floor that we'd like for our structure. I'll use the generic 12-inch. And then pick Create Floor. I went back to the model and joined these two forms so that when I place a curtain system, I'll pick Curtain System. On this surface, I'll select Create System. It will form around the projected shape and not all the way through behind it. You can place walls, changing the properties, and we can place our roof. If we select the mask, change the parameters that I established. If I change the height at the north side to 210 feet and pick Apply, notice that the mass changes, but the elements like the roof and the walls won't update automatically until we select here the mass and pick Related Hosts and then Update to Face. By doing that, you'll see that any faces that we modeled to the mass will be updated to the new mass form. I'm going to turn my shadows on, but keep in mind that it does make the drawing a little bit slower. If you're trying to select the mass, you can rest your pointer and pick the tab key to tab through the different elements until you see that your tooltip says mass, and then click. Once you have it selected, you can see the properties to modify. The other choice is to select everything, and then, as we said in the first video, you can drop this list down and filter through using properties the mass to show its properties. Or you can pick the filter icon that we're familiar with at the bottom right corner, uncheck all of these categories, and put a check mark in mass and pick OK. When you select the mass and pick Edit Family, if you don't have the family open, Revit brings you to a different work environment with less controls over these shape handles. If you open the family and have both the project and the family open, select the mass and pick Edit Family, you'll have more control over what's called a shape handle in the family. I'll pick Control Tab to get back to my project. The USGBC has a LEED rating system, which includes materials, establishing points for materials reuse, recycled content, and regional materials. We can use Revit to give us an idea of how much of this material we're using in our project. There are so many different types of recycled materials that we can use, including fly ash in the concrete, recycled glass in the wall and floor tile, and reclaimed wood products. As a quick example for this project, I'm going to change this floor to recycled wood flooring. We can select, as an example, this generic floor, pick Edit Type, duplicate this generic 12-inch flooring, and call it recycled wood flooring. Pick OK, and then pick the Edit button under Structure so that we can change the material of the structure, duplicating the wood flooring and calling it recycled wood flooring. We can decide to change the color slightly to see the difference. You might not be able to see it at first because the mass is covering it, so we can type in VG, and in the Visibility Graphics Overrides, take the check mark out of mass and pick OK. In the View tab, pick Schedules, Material Takeoff. You have a choice of creating a material takeoff for all recycled materials or for just floors. I'll change the name of this schedule to Recycled Material Takeoff and then pick OK. The fields that we're going to need here are the material name and the material area. You can add additional fields depending on what information that you need. Then we'll go to the Filter tab and change the filter by material name, and then change equals to contains, and underneath material name type in recycled wood. In the Appearance tab, you can change other graphics for our schedule. Go ahead and pick OK, and now we have recycled material takeoff schedule with the name of the flooring and the square footage for our material area. Even after you've created your schedule, in the Properties palette you can pick Formatting and change the material name and area to Center Alignment. Let's go to the 3D view and take a look at Solar Sun Studies. Under Visual Displays, let's go to the Shadows icon and pick Graphic Display Options. Under Sun Settings, icon with the 3 little dots, and take a look at Solar Studies. We can create a still or single day, or an animation during a single day at specific time intervals, or one time over multiple days. We'll pick in front of single day, highlight Winter Solstice Solar Study, and pick Duplicate. We'll call this one Project Solar Study and pick OK, and then change the location by selecting this icon with 3 little dots to Southfield, Michigan. Pick Search and then pick OK. The date is set at December 21st because we use this Winter Solstice Solar Study. The time frame is from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m., but you can change that if you'd like to start a little earlier. The frames are based on the time intervals. Depending on your computer speed, we can use every 30 minutes, creating 13 frames. Let's keep the check mark in ground plane at level 1 so that we can see our shadows on the ground plane. We'll pick Apply and OK. Using these defaults for lighting, go ahead and pick OK. You'll see right away that the shadow is a lot longer because of the winter sun angle. We could duplicate the 3D views and set up the appropriate view, but instead let's go to the level 2 floor plan and create under the 3D view in the view tab a camera coming from here the south direction straight onto our building. We can then adjust the cropping, turn the shadows on, and then in the graphic display options, we can go to sun settings and single day and select Project Solar Study, the one that we set up in the 3D view. We can pick OK and OK. Under the shadow icon, pick Preview Solar Study. You'll see the frames and the time and controls to play the animation, helping us to see the shadows and possibly update our design and shading devices. Highlight this 3D view, right-click and pick Rename, and we'll call this Project Solar Study. Then, under the Application menu, go to Export, Images and Animations, and Solar Study. We'll use the defaults for the output length, and then pick OK, and save that AVI file as a solar study. Now we're ready to highlight sheets, right click and pick New Sheet, pick the Load button, scroll down to Title Blocks. We'll use the 11 by 17 horizontal sheet, pick OK. Drag and drop your Project Solar Study onto the sheet, and then under Schedules, bring in your recycled material, takeoff, and your mass schedule, and rename this sheet Solar Study and Schedules.